faces, Lord, they hate to hear your message. Though I'm geared with your protection, your armor that I've been blessed with, no stressing. When I'm trying to teach them all your lessons, they looking at me crazy like I got a weird perspective. Smeared faces, Lord, they hate to hear your message. Though I'm geared with your protection, your armor that I've been blessed with, no stressing. When I'm trying to teach them all your lessons, they looking at me crazy like I got a weird perspective.
Welcome back to the Weird Perspective Podcast. I'm your host, Derry, and we are in season number 3. And so unfortunately, my co-host, he's not here today, but I have an amazing guest joining me. First and foremost, this brother he's my brother in Christ. So let's just get that out the way. That's the most important thing, that he loves the Lord. Secondly he is a dope rapper, right? More than a rapper, he is a hip hop artist, right? All the way from Cleveland, but he's been calling Chicago his home for over a decade, I believe. I want y'all to show your love, Weird Perspective family, to my new friend, my new homie, Mr. CW Allen.
Hey,
what's
thanks
up,
for
man?
having me. I appreciate it.
Oh man, yeah, it's been a while, us connecting, texting, going back and forth, man. But I am so happy that you are here.
Man, me too. I mean, it's always good to get with good people and chop it up a little bit, talk about some things that people maybe think weird and uncomfortable to talk about. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too, man. And so before we get into the music and all the big things that you're doing here, just let the people know a little bit about who you are, man. Where you from, a little bit of your upbringing.
Yep. Yeah, so originally from Cleveland, Ohio, born in the late 80s. And
shout out those that Bone Thugs out there.
That's right, Bone Thugs. Yeah, they didn't live too far from where I grew up as a shorty.
Nice.
But grew up in Cleveland, born and raised, and my mom and dad split when I was young, so kind of raised by my mom and grandmothers in a sense. And then both my mom and dad had issues with drugs when I was really little.
Oh.
And my mom got clean, started AA. She's been doing that for about 27, 28 years.
Nice.
So
Praise the Lord,
just a product of that program really saving her life and seeing the beauty of the woman she's become. My pop eventually met the Lord as well, and we could tap into that story later if you want. But just a lot of hurt and pain, but also a lot of beauty and redemption, and God doing His thing. So from Cleveland, got here to Chicago to go to Moody. So that's what I went to school in 2009, and it's been a rap ever since.
Moody,
Yep.
yeah, we gonna get into Moody.
Yeah. Don't get me canceled.
Nah, I mean I'm currently a Moody student myself, so you gonna get canceled, I'm gonna get kicked out. We on the same.
Well,
boat.
I got my papers.
But we gonna get into Moody though. But man, what's some of the things in your early life? Like, when did you come to know the Lord?
Yeah, so like I shared, my mom, was in and out with her drug addiction, and I share it because she's super open about it. It's a big part of her story, and she's a really beautiful in telling it and showing that redemptive part of her life. But so when I was younger, we didn't really do family trips because my mom was busy with that and didn't work. And then my dad was doing his thing, but we weren't living together. So there wasn't really like family trips, things like that. I remember when my mom, I actually talked about this in the book, my mom told me a story that when I was younger, she said I was about 2 years old. We were going on a family trip to Virginia, and they got so high that they just circled around the city for hours. Going in circles, and it never made it out, But I shared it to share. When I was 12 years old, around 11, 12, I went on a trip to Michigan. So it was like one of my first big trips out the city. And I was spending the summer with my uncle and family members in Michigan. And when I was there, I didn't notice, but I had a cousin who knew the Lord and was in seminary. And so he was spending a lot of time with me, and probably, as I think back, being very intentional about sharing the gospel with me. So we would spend time together, and throughout the summer, he was dropping these nuggets. And then eventually I asked, about the end of the world and hell. And this is 99, and everybody, Y2K, think the world coming to end in 2000. So I was terrified. I'm like, well, what I'm going to do? Like, I ain't ready to go, But he said, "Do you know Jesus?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know Jesus. Everybody in the hood know Jesus."
Yeah.
And Easter Sunday, and he began to explain us the difference between knowing about God and knowing God. And I was like really intrigued, but that's where I met the Lord. I asked him to save me and to forgive me for my sin. Still had a lot of hurdles to jump over as a new believer, but that's when I believe the journey began on that family trip when I got to spend some time in Michigan. Yeah.
That's good, man. Yeah, I witnessed some things. I can only imagine like some of the heartbreak you must have experienced going through that, a broken family.
Yeah.
But what was how did you get into music?
Music started when I was around I think I was either 18 or 19. I think 19 because it's my senior year of high school. So I was like a later senior. Yeah, because my birthday in October. So I was hosting an open mic for my church. At this point, I was a believer, loved the Lord. And I had a girlfriend who was like, CW always writing these poems and stuff, but he ain't gonna do open mic. Basically calling me out in front of everybody. And we on the bus heading to school. And so I couldn't let my car get pulled. So I pulled out my notebook and started rapping.
Okay.
And a few of the homies was like, yo, you actually pretty nice. And so me, two of my youth leaders, and one of my homies from youth group put a group together called the Brotherhood. And we said we're gonna do open mic. So we wrote a little song. And I remember, my producer at that time was another high school student of mine. He was another brother I went to high school with. He was completely blind, legally blind. He did everything by ear. You would hear the MIDI guy talking like right key, left key. Like it was the wildest thing.
What?
Yeah, completely blind, but he produced the tracks.
Adam got to step his game up. It's my producer.
Right.
You should record these videos
Get
blind.
your game right. Yeah, that's right. So he produced the track, and I remember hours. One time I was at his house, and I got there probably around 6 p.m, and it was around 8 a.m. when I left, and that's when I knew like this might be for me. And then the affirmation I got from different people invited me to come do things after that first open mic. Freestyling was effortless, like all of that stuff. It was like, you are really built for this. So that's when it started.
So did you notice this as a young teenager? Like
not some. I mean, I always wrote poetry.
Okay, so
I
poetry was your first love?
Freehand drawing. I could sketch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so even when I was 4 or 5, I could sketch. I remember my mom got me this Pittsburgh Art Institute test. They were doing the stuff online in the 90s, and you could get the test sent to you. They would review it, and you could get into school. So I remember I got like a B+, and the guy came out, was like, hey, your son really could do this. I think he's talented, but we just couldn't afford the school. So it was one of them things where I always could freehand draw. I began developing poetry. I was pretty decent with words, and then when I learned I could freestyle, it was over with. Like, and I learned like watching Eminem on 8 Mile, like imitating his voice. So I was messing with my mom, bringing in the groceries, like just rapping, and that's where it went.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So drawing, and then poetry. Freestyling, up until now. Okay. And so that at 19, that's when you took music serious, when you formed that group. Did y'all do anything besides throw?
We did. Yeah, we did some local shows, so we did some stuff. But my two youth leaders, they were like real grown men with like lives, right?
Yeah.
One of the brothers, he actually I don't know where he at these days, but he had some situations that kind of put him back a little bit. My other brother, we still really close. He's a principal of a high school now. He got kids and a family. At that point, we was all single. And then my other brother, he's working at a church. So we just had different paths. But one thing that stuck with me was the music. So I always found different groups and creatives to continue doing that with, even as they had different paths in life. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Did how much of your faith like influenced your poetry and your freestyling?
Huge. It was huge. I remember, who was it? The Truth. He said, "I started gospel. Most ain't accustomed to that," in his first album.
Yeah.
And that was my story. I just wanted to tell people about my faith. Super zealous, super excited. Probably zeal without knowledge a lot of times, just really beating people up with it. But just a young dude who was just excited about his faith. My old rap name was Zeal.
Okay.
So, like to give you context of my personality. And I remember we was at bus stops rapping, sharing the gospel with people and passing out tracts and doing all the conventional 90s things with hip hop on top of it. And for me, it was a tool. I mean, I knew it was my culture, but I didn't think of it in the way that I think of it now, where it's more intimate in that way. But it was just like, yo, this is the way that God wants me to share His word.
So when did you find your way here to Chicago?
Yep. 2009 came here in the middle of the winter.
2009 in the winter?
In the winter, bruh. So I knew I was working. I finished high school and I was working at this like steel mill delivering parts for mechanics. And I knew that wasn't what I was going to do forever. But I had started taking some distance classes in Cleveland, some distance learning from Moody. And I wasn't too sure what God was doing. I was doing these summer jobs where I was doing ministry full time at camps, straight out of high school. And it just worked. Me and the kids, we had great rapport with each other. I loved it. I still was able to rap. It all fit.
Yeah.
And I figured, I must be built for ministry. I resisted it at first, but then it just seemed like this is what God want me to do. So I filled out an application for Moody. And I filled out one for Lancaster Bible College because my hero, the ambassador, the hip hop artist, went to Lancaster. And I had heard nothing from Moody. So like you fill out your application and as a student there now, they usually tell you something in October so that you can get ready to come in January. I didn't hear anything and it's like November. So the person who was like over the new students that came in called me and she was like, "Yo, you coming to Moody?" And I'm like, "I ain't heard nothing. I guess y'all didn't want me," And she's like, "Hold up." So she hangs up the phone and she goes back and looks through all the stacks of applicants, can't find mine. So then she goes and looks in the former year files. They had put my file in the wrong year, a year back. So nobody reviewed it. So she took it in front of a board. They reviewed it and was like, "He cool. We think he'll be great for here." And now I got in.
Because I was about to say, it's different now. Like they call you like every week.
Oh yeah, because the enrollment down. But at that,
you getting emails.
Right,
and all that
it's
stuff.
different
like,
now.
Yeah.
But back then, only 20% of the people who applied actually got into Moody.
Wow.
So for me, it was like, this is crazy. But the only thing was they didn't have in-house loans. There was no financial aid. Everything was out of pocket or Fannie Mae, which was a crazy expensive situation. Me and my mom went around the banks. It just didn't make sense for her finances with 3 other kids. So I figured Moody just wasn't for me because I couldn't afford it. And so I was ready to go to Lancaster. They had a scholarship that would cover most of the money. I had, Cross Movement and other hip hop groups down there. And I knew some guys who were part of Cross Movement back. So I'm like, I could be discipled. I could spend time there and
What
grow.
city is that in?
That's Philly. So Philly? Lancaster is a small town outside of Philly, probably maybe an hour or so, maybe a little bit more. But it made sense. My best friend was going there as well. So it was like, this is it.
Your freestyle game would have went.
Probably right. And it was crazy. But I felt like God just would not put this thing away of going to Chicago. And then my church was like, "Well, we can give you $2,000 through the scholarship fund." And then somebody else was like, "I got a G for you." And then the Lord put on my heart to raise money. And before I knew it, I had at least a deposit to get down there. And then I was like, well, if it's His will, it's His bill. But when I really knew, right?
That's
the
good.
text.
We got to make sure we write that down.
My last Sunday there at church, there was 2 women who came up to me. One of them, she gave me a check. She grabbed my hands. She looked at me. She said, "I'm putting my trust in you Don't waste this.
Wow.
And then another lady came up to me, and she had, she was mentally handicapped, and she gave me like $2. She's like, I want you to go to school. And I wanted to give it back, and then I also felt like God was telling me, no, this is her blessing you, and this is me showing you I'm gonna provide.
Yeah.
And all through my 4 years of Moody, God provided. When I was cleaning them toilets, when I was getting a loose change at shows, hoping someone. I remember one time I opened my mailbox and there was a check for a G from a doctor I had never met.
Wow.
Like that was my story getting through school. So at that point it was like, what's up? What's next?
Hey, the Lord, when He tell you to go, just go. Don't worry about how you gonna get
business.
there. Don't worry. Yeah. So I love what you said. If it's His
will, it's a bill.
If it's His will, it's His bill. Put that on the shirt. Now that's really good. So speaking of Moody, what was your experience like at Moody?
Overall, it was pretty good. I think once I found out what major I was going to do, I had 3 different majors. At one point, I started as a pastoral major, exposition study. So that means you study to preach and teach. And I just realized I don't want to be a pastor of a church. Like I love shepherding people, but I don't feel called to lead a church. And I didn't want to sit in Greek and Hebrew classes when I had commentary. So I was just like, that's not how I want to spend my 4 years. And next I shifted over to, I was sacred music. But then I was like, do I really want to sit and play classical music? It's beautiful, but I'm a hip hop guy.
Yeah.
And so it made so much sense for me to shift to communications. The program was changing. It was becoming more cutting edge. The guy who took it over, Brian Kemerzart, was very forward thinking, really aligned with my learning style. And at this point, I was doing graphic design and websites and all kind of different stuff. So it was like, it scratched my artistic creativity like none other. And then I still had my core Bible classes where, I could still do ministry stuff and share. So it was like the perfect marriage. So that was great. There was definitely some things I think that Moody could work on when it came to race relations and things like that. But overall, my experience was a lot more positive than maybe some other folks who went through Moody.
Have you been back since? Have you been back up to the campus?
Every once in a while, not a whole lot.
Okay. But
like I still have, folks that I know who work there.
Yeah,
and
they got
things
a whole.
like
They finally finished this building. I can't remember. I'm only 2 weeks in, so
knowing
the name of them buildings, I don't know.
Yep.
But
so you talking about the Gary Chapman building, right?
Yeah. So they got like a full-fledged. They got a couple rooms in there that's studios. They got a podcast room.
Yeah.
So it's pretty dope. They almost got me to change my major from human services to communications just because of
As
that.
you should.
I was really close. I had like both of them, but I was like, which one?
Yeah.
But yeah, because of podcasting and my love for technology and stuff like that, I was really close to going for communications. But I really love serving people and helping people, and I believe that with the mental health challenges that we have and just all the challenges of the youth, just felt like human services was what God was calling me. So I'm in human service. I still could switch if I need to, but
Yeah. Because you always can serve humans.
yeah. So, but yeah, that's where I'm at. So, when you were at Moody, how many black people was it?
Oh.
Was it just you?
So
and like
we had
5
an
of them?
actual minority table in the cafeteria. There was a table that was set aside. Everybody in the school knew it for, not by Moody. We created a table.
Oh, okay. I was about to say.
They didn't segregate us.
Come on, man. Blacks only.
But it was one of those tables. So it was black, Puerto Rican, Mexican, like all of the minority students who kind of hung together, who had, stories that were similar, or they understood being other, or, not in the majority culture. It was just a free time for them to hang out, know each other's references of movies, things like that. That just comes second nature when you are similar.
Yeah.
Not to say that other or different is bad. It's just different, right? And so we had a minority table. I led a group called Embrace. It was the African American group on campus. There was a few folks. So it wasn't deep for sure. Like I could probably count on my hand the 20 or 30 students that were, black from like the states, but let alone black period, you know, or brown.
Yeah,
it's thinner now.
It's a lot thin.
Yeah.
Like, I be trying to look at. I be like, I seen you before? Seen you? I feel like I see the same 5 students.
Yeah. Well,
and they not from here. They not from Chicago.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I think the one thing that they can do better is prepare students for what they're going to experience.
That's right.
The diversity of the city, how segregated the city is. I don't think people fully understand how segregated Chicago is.
Oh, super segregated. That was culture shock for me when I got here.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's some of the big differences between like Cleveland and Chicago?
Yeah, Cleveland is, so I grew up mostly on the west side. I spent some time on the east side when I was younger. That's where Bone Thugs from and all of that. My cousin actually went to high school with them. But grew up on the west side, which is a melting pot of people. The high school down the street from the church I attended, it was over 20 languages spoken in high school. Very big Puerto Rican community. Black, Puerto Rican, white. I mean, everybody meshed in together. And then you had a lot of folks who were leaving the Civil War in Darfur as well who were there. So it was just a very culturally mixed community. And so when I had my wedding, like my brother, you know, he's black, my best friend, I had another best friend who's Lebanese and Italian. My other guy who's in the wedding's white. Like that's my life, right? Yeah. And that's what Cleveland was. So when I got here, to see that only black people lived in certain pockets and Puerto Rican people and Mexican people, and it was just so weird to me because I'm like, that's crazy. Like, we so separated.
Yeah.
I just wasn't accustomed to that.
Yeah. So you say you came in 2009?
Yeah.
I graduated high school in 2007.
Okay.
And I grew up in Logan Square.
Okay.
So people who watching this now are like, Logan Square is super nice, but Logan Square was like, man, bro, it was predominantly Hispanic. Mm-hmm. And then you had the next group it was blacks, and then it was whites sprinkled in there. Now you go there and it's majority white.
Yeah. Yep.
And so you still got some Latinos here and there, but for the most part, man, it's like they came and everything got bought out and everything changed, and it's a whole lot different. And you starting to see it being pushed now towards Humboldt Park. You know, once you start seeing people jogging, pushing strollers with babies. Oh,
it's a wrap.
You already know. Then the Starbucks go up.
Starbucks, Whole Foods, Chipotle, the skinny gentrification font numbers. Yeah. It's a wrap.
So that's what Logan Square is. But I went to Lakeview High School, which was at that time the most diverse high school in the city for a non-selective enrollment public school.
Okay.
We had people from everywhere. Then, you know, Katrina had hit, so we had a lot of people from Louisiana who lived on the south side. People from the south side was traveling all the way to the north side to go to Lakeview High School.
Wow.
So Lakeview High School was extremely diverse. And so when you walked into the lunchroom, you just look, you got Asians, you got blacks, you got, you know, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, you got the kids over here. Like, it was very diverse. And so, like, I'm used to being around different types of people.
Right.
I enjoy it. I love it because I get to know about different people's culture, and I feel more in my element. I don't really know how. I don't know if I ever said this on this podcast, but I don't really know how I should feel about this. But like, I'm more comfortable in those diverse spaces than I am with my own people.
Okay. Why you think that is?
I think I just spend more time with them.
Okay.
Like, growing up, my best friend was Puerto Rican and Italian.
Okay.
He moved away when I was like 12. My best friend now of 20 years, he's Puerto Rican. I spend a lot of time with Hispanics. Okay. And so, and they've always like embraced me.
Sure.
And they parents, the moms, the grandmas, super loving, welcoming. And I never felt, you know, judged or isolated or like I wasn't wanted or that I shouldn't be there.
Sure.
And so outside of my own blood family, there was only maybe 4 or 5 black guys that I could say was like my friends and stuff like that. But yeah, growing up in the neighborhood, those are the people I spent the most time with. Right. So just growing up, especially once my grandmother passed away, my family kind of just everybody went their own ways, different cities, and moved away. So we don't spend as much time as we could. And then when I left Logan Square and I moved to the west side, Austin, it was just like violence. I was fighting all the time because I was different. So I had like a Hispanic cadence in, you know, the way I spoke and the way I said certain words.
Okay.
And so, you know, I had hair back then. And so I had like soft wavy hair.
Okay.
And so I had this like baby face. And so when I moved to the West Side, it was just from day one, it was just like a lot of fighting.
Oh, word.
And it was weird because my dad lived in Austin. So a lot of times my dad was real inconsistent in my life, but I spent a lot of time in Austin, like riding my bike and hanging around. So I didn't feel like out of place, but like moving over there was just like being there every day.
Yep.
It was just like, yo, it was different. And
Yeah,
so for me, yeah, like, you know, I'm looking around Moody now and I'm like, man, they could have some more black people here or market it. I don't know what
I think that's, you know, and I think that's one of Moody's biggest missteps is that just not, I don't know if it could be marketing, that could be some, but then also just having the right voices. There are some good voices at the table. I know some of them, but having more diverse voices and going in places. And I think even shepherding or stewarding the folks who left Moody, who are out here. Like I can think about 9 or 10 people who are doing similar things that I am or other ministries that I wonder how much Moody really taps into them and their networks. To even think about them as being donors one day as the donor base is dying out and things like. So I think there's just some strategic things and really offering, you know, ways to make it an on-ramp for people of color. It's just a different way of thinking. I remember in our ministry, this is similar, but it's a little off topic. We actually had a support raising model where we all raise support to work. We raise all our funds. And we don't now. And so when I started, there was 6 staff members. 2 of them were black. And now we have a staff of 23 and 1 of them's white. And what we did was we raised our funds as an organization where people didn't have to raise support. And we saw, because some people just historically, because maybe their church background wasn't a support raising church background, you know, even when you think about like African American churches, they like raising support, like the support was people coming when they getting beat and they can't pay their bills and the church took care of them like that, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like there was some missionaries, but it just looked different. Outreach looked different. So I think you think about things like that, but it just wasn't a cadence that a lot of people was used to. You know, as a black kid, I know, you know, if one of our parents sends us to school and gets us through it or assists us, it's like, why are you asking for money now? You went to school, you get a job, you know what I mean? So it's just like a mindset that's different. And so we shifted that, and we saw now we have more black staff in a 82% black community. And I think Moody has to think about what things does Moody do that can be shifted that aren't sacred cows that will enable a more of an on-ramp or a desirable on-ramp for people of color.
Yeah. Because, and just the neighborhood that it's in, it's so funny. But that's the whole thing. We could go 2 hours on Moody.
I know, right?
2 hours on Moody. But man, what's some key moments that shaped your spiritual journey or your faith walk? Yeah.
I definitely would say read the Catalyst book. That's that whole book. That's my book. It's all about catalytic moments that shifted me forever, that changed me forever, and the lessons I gleaned from them. So one, I think, was coming to Chicago because I met my wife at Moody, and a semester after I had got there. So that was huge. Going to Moody, getting my degree, learning, growing, meeting my wife. That was another one. The job I'm at right now, Sunshine Gospel, I've been there roughly about 14 years. So that first summer I got here, I started as an intern, and it's been a wrap ever since. But I think just really opened my mind up to what ministry looks like outside of just preaching at people, but thinking holistically about the whole person, the whole community. Theology as a place, thinking about place-based theology versus just philosophies. So that was really huge for me, learning about the idea of shalom and God owning everything and making all things new. versus just getting rid of it like a consumer, you know. So I think that just really rocked my theology, and it changed the way that I made music thereof. I think another one was in 2014 when Mike Brown died. That was a huge one for me because it really forced me to think deeper about my place and standing as a black man in America and my theology surrounding that and what I thought the Bible had to say about justice and redemption. So I think that was a pivotal moment that really changed my music, my career track, even the way that I think about just life and eternity. So that was a huge one as well. Losing my dad was another one. That was that still rocks me to this day, like thinking about it. But that was a huge one too. So yeah, I think I got a lot, and having my babies, that was huge.
How many you got?
2 little girls.
2 little girls.
Yeah.
Ooh. You plan on having any more?
No, I'm done. I'm out of there.
That quick.
Yeah, no, I got that appointment set for next week.
Hey, I'm over a year in, so
okay.
We'll talk about where you're going.
Yeah,
after. We'll talk
sure.
offline.
Got my ice pack ready.
Man, so you shared a word at Slam that I thought was so on time and impactful, and I had never heard done before. I'm gonna let you explain it. What was the heart behind that for the kids that we serve, and why did you go in that direction? Yeah,
it was Black, Beautiful, and Biblical. Black, Beautiful, and Biblical. And I was asked to talk to Slam, which is predominantly black students, about our place in the Bible and our place in human history as black people and God's plan for us. And I think that often we have seen images that don't reflect us when they probably should in a lot of spaces when you think about where people lived at.
Yeah, at least have a racial ambiguous Jesus or something.
For sure.
Just don't have blind hair, black.
Right. That's right. Yeah. But I think we just don't have even a context. Even when I think about like my hip hop culture, right? That's one that I have thought deep about because for a long time I didn't really think about hip hop as a culture. I knew it was, but I didn't know it was, if that makes sense. Like when you think about our hip hop culture, the music we speak, the slang or vernacular of our community, where it's prevalent, our clothing, right? Our just our whole swag is a whole culture. Yeah. And what the difference between a culture and music is music fades away and then a new genre takes it over or it just disappears or dissipates. But when you think about hip hop culture, yes, the music is backed up a little bit, but it ain't went nowhere. No. But when you think about the culture of hip hop, that ain't went nowhere. Like there's still slang, right? Like I can speak a sentence to you and it's like another language. There's still
now that they got whole websites and hip hop
urban dictionaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like just realizing that.
Wait, really quick.
Have
you heard of the Gen Z Bible?
Yes, I have.
Give me your 2 cents
I read a
really
couple
quick
and I was like,
one.
that is great. I'm all for it if someone can teach it well, teach God's word well, and make sure that people are, it's not just making Jesus a fad, but if he becomes central to the heart, I'm all with it.
Hey, that's good.
Yeah, I remember I rapped at church. I was about, I think I was about 20, and Pastor Dan was the pastor before my pastor that I attended church under. And Pastor Dan was in like his 70s. He went to Moody, and so did the pastor that I was under went to Moody as well. And he said, I couldn't understand a lick of what you said because I was rapping in service, but he was like, I'm all for it because I know you love the Lord. And that was just so affirming to me and so life-changing. Because this older white man who ran around with Billy Graham couldn't understand any of the words I said. And he loved what we did because he knew who we were and he knew our heart. Yeah. And so that's why stuff like that Bible excites me, even though it's probably not one I'm using for my exegesis, right? But I think it's dope.
if you want kids to read and understand what they read,
That's right.
then you pass it along. I know some people feel like, no, we can't. That's changing the words. It's just like, well, we got an English translation. We got
Exactly.
Hebrew, Greek. We got Latin.
Right.
Old English, New English. We got like, I don't know how many, 6 different
Yeah.
English translations of the Bible.
Yep.
Now we got a slang translation. It's just
Exactly.
like, hey, I think
Exactly.
if God is going to be glorified, like, let's do it.
For sure.
I mean, I think the same thing can be said about like music, right? So you got a lot of people who feel like, you know, they got an issue with gospel, or they got an issue with certain African traditions of how they worship. And they be like, well, what are they doing? Is that the way it was? Just like, hey, just because you haven't heard it or experienced it or seen it, they might be dancing, or it might sound like a chant, but if they're, you know, worshiping Jesus with their songs and the way that they praise and worship, who are you to say that it's wrong?
Different ain't bad. It's just different. I mean,
Right.
and often we think different is bad.
And it probably existed before this. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah, I'm sorry. So, but let me finish that.
Oh, yeah, no,
that
go ahead.
about the because you asked a question about the Black, beautiful, and biblical
Yeah.
lessons. So I bring up the hip hop culture because often I go to churches that are in the heart of the city where it is that culture is king. I can see where if it's not, then you don't embrace it as much. But it's like no remnants, no DJ, no 808s. No body rapping, like not an ounce of that culture which is surrounding that church.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just a gross misstep. It's like it doesn't make any sense to not find creative ways to embrace this culture that is the culture of my community.
yeah.
Right. And so when I think about that lesson, it just affirms not just the students, but even myself that like, my culture matters. I matter. My skin tone is not by accident. God is not colorblind. He loves color, and he created it for a reason. And so when I think about piercing through that lesson and helping students to see that we do belong, and that God allowed us to get through some tumultuous times here in America for a reason.
Yeah.
We are very much a part of the grand scheme and story of God and his narrative.
Why do you think when we start talking about like being black and even talking about Jesus being a man of color and things like that, why do you think that that's triggering to the whites or the Caucasian folks?
The whites. Okay. I think there's a number of things, but I think on the face value of it, well, there's a loaded history when it comes to race relations in our country. And for some people, it is just that like it's microaggressions, it's underlying racism that they don't even realize that they are exhibiting. And some people, they just straight up exhibiting, like they could care less. But then there's also a reality of ignorance when it comes to seeing or knowing there were characters and people of color in the Bible, and really understanding and embracing that. Like, we don't often understand how powerful media and communications is, because we can know something deeply in our heart and still not know it because we've seen it differently.
Yeah.
Right. In so many ways. And so when you have seen images and continual depictions, and you begin to dream up what it looks like in your own head, it looks a certain way. So how dare someone make the Little Mermaid black? How dare you make Jesus' hair a little bit more kinkier? Like, that doesn't make sense in my head because I haven't seen that. So I think there's an ignorance there as well. Proximity to people of color, where you feel, oh, it makes sense that people of color and black and brown and different shades are represented in the Bible and will be in heaven and are main characters in some stories.
Yeah.
And so I think the whole narrative has just been hijacked throughout history, and I think it's our job to redeem it and work together and figure that out.
And that's how some people view Chicago.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, so I lived in Akron for almost 2 years.
Acktown Reppa.
Yeah, I was there, man. No, never mind.
Did you think it was LeBron?
No. So I lived on the other side of the highway. It was a highway that divided the there's very small towns in Akron. So it was Bath, which is where LeBron's first original mansion is. On the other side of the highway was Copley. Yeah. And then it was Fairlawn. And so I lived in Copley, and then I lived in Fairlawn.
Yep.
And so I seen it. We got to talk to the guard.
That's wild.
That was on duty. We took pictures and all that stuff. But yeah, if I wanted to walk over there, I could have. It was that close. I was like, man, these cities is really small. These little towns. But yeah, but I was there for almost 2 years. But when I was there, people thought because I was from Chicago that I was like this gangster. One dude just put this whole story on me. He thought I was like hiding out
GD or something, huh?
Yeah, that I did something and I was on a run, or I was hiding out from these people looking for me. And like I was working at Walmart, fam. I'm like, let me talk to you real quick. No,
that's your cover story.
I was like, let me talk to you. I was like, why are you telling people this made up story? I was like, who told you that? And he was like, man, you from Chicago? He's like, you probably been shot before. And I was like, nah, cuz I ain't never been shot. He thought I was gang affiliated. I was like, no, I don't know. Everybody got like family members and people that they know. But I was like, I'm not like, never been jumped into a gang. I was just like, what are you talking about? I was like, why? He was like, man, Chicago crazy. And then he said the most dumbest thing I've ever heard anybody say directly to my face. He said, I was like, man, won't you come to Chicago with me? And then you'll be able to see the city. He was like, man, I ain't gonna go to Chicago, man, I'm gonna die. And I was like, well, I'm from Chicago, and I'm standing in front of you. I ain't dead. I was like, I'm not gonna take you, to O Block and be like, yeah, let's hang out right here.
Right.
Like there is a ton of places in Chicago where you can live and have a good time, and you ain't gotta worry about nobody shooting you. I was like, it's just like any other city. I think the spotlight is just on Chicago right now.
Yeah.
And there's violence and there's crazy things that go on, but it's violence and crazy things that happen in California too, and New York and Philly and all these places have dangerous neighborhoods. Yeah. But they just thought, man, like that I was this dude, and they just really in their whole brain came up with a whole story that I didn't tell them about me, and I was like, whoa, like this is out of hand.
That's real.
And so, man, I had to tell dude to stop talking because the stuff started to spread through Walmart. And so people looking at me crazy and giving me side eyes, and I was like, whoa, let me just stop.
Oh my gosh. You about to get fired on your off day.
Man, for like, hey, you from Chicago, man, we gotta let you go. You know you're gonna probably shoot
just
this place
come
up.
Back.
Yeah, just gotta go call me or something and tell me not to come back. But it was just crazy on how much people can have a view of something or a thought of something that they heard on the news or TV, and then they take it and just run with it. And come up with their own story, but they never experienced the city before. And another short story, I used to do Uber, and when I was doing Uber, I picked up this guy. He had been around the world like multiple times. And he comes to Chicago, and he lives here for 2 months out of the summer. Okay. And I was like, why would you come here? And he was like, this is the most beautiful city in the whole world, and it's the best place to live in the summer. And I was like, what? Chicago? And he was like, I've been to every major city, small city. I've been around the world multiple times. I come here to live for 2 months. And it like blew my mind.
It's real. It's real.
And I was like, what? And then I heard somebody else say it before, but it really goes to show you, like, when people don't experience a place or people, and they just see it on TV or they read articles or whatever, they can really get this false image of what that place is or what those people are about. And I think we've been dealing with it forever, right? And I think right now a lot of people feel like that about Chicago. And so, I think Moody, churches, suburbs, they really need to start to really deal with that and wrestle through that, because like our kids, like we get mentors that come from other cities, and then some of them, like, they freak out when they realize what's going on.
Well, and the reality is, when you even think about like white flight, right? The sociological term white flight, when between the 50s and 60s, where white families exited the city and created the suburbs on these GI Bills like overnight. So in period of 10 years, suburbs were birthed. And what came out of those? Mega churches, the way mall complexes look. But like you think about like some of the larger evangelical, predominantly white churches were built on the back of segregating themselves.
Yeah.
And so what do you do with that theologically, right? So I think it's a lot of just like even thinking about our history when we want to really unravel stereotypes and stuff. We just got a lot of work to do. And I don't even know if we'll see we'll see some fruit, but the thick fruit of it in our lifetime.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going to be rough.
Right?
We still going to try.
Yeah, for sure.
Empowered by the Holy Spirit. But man, it's rough out here.